Welcome back to Virginia Free Interviews. The candidates so far we've had on two statewide candidates, both Democrats running for lieutenant governor, the same seat that our next guest wants to apply for. He is Delegate Glenn Davis of Virginia Beach, who is currently serving the House of Delegates and was previously on the Virginia Beach City Council. Welcome, Delegate Davis. Tell us why you're running for lieutenant governor.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's pretty simple, Chris. My background is business, and it's always been, how do we make sure that we kind of protect that American dream for the next generation, for future entrepreneurs, for future small business owners. 70% of all jobs are created by small businesses. And unfortunately, we've been going backwards in Virginia. We used to be the best state in the nation for business and job growth. Now we're number 13. We have the 30th worst tax policies, Chris, and Virginia just continually kicks the can down the road with tax reforms and regulatory reforms that we need to be making to start protecting, those opportunities for the next generation. And I'm running to make sure that we become number one again for business and job growth, and I make sure everyone can have true economic opportunity.
Well, Glenn, obviously to any business organization, that sounds great, but there's often competing interests when you dive into the policies. Let's start with you mentioned taxes, and our tax ranking is, you said, is lower. You have two competing tax visions on the Republican gubernatorial side between leading candidate who's leading the polls, Ed Gillespie, and Senator Frank Wagner, who's from your part of the Commonwealth, Virginia Beach. Who's right?
Well, it's not necessarily who's right, Chris. It's two different plans. Ed's out there with a tax cut for individuals. He's right when he says that we haven't had what I think since 1972 we haven't had a reduction in our tax rate. Frank says we have to invest in infrastructure, which we do because that's important to make sure that we continue to maintain our roads and our port down here and other areas that provide the jobs we need for those coming out of school and with skilled trades. But I don't think they're mutually exclusive, Chris. I think it's all about prioritization. If we continue to grow the infrastructure, create jobs, grow the small businesses, as a delegate yourself, that raises revenue, and that revenue then can be utilized to offset, taxes for working families. I think there's a clear correlation there. We just have to make sure that we have the right priority on it and we get the details right.
Well, it sounds like you're trying to split the baby. Not trying to be respectful here, but you're saying that Ed's kind of right and Frank's kind of right, and
Chris,
the whole point with having a legislature is working those things out, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Chris. I really think you can do both. I'm the guy that finds ways to get things done. If we need to invest in infrastructure, continue to maintain our roads, create those economic opportunities that allow small businesses to flourish and brings in new innovation. We also need to take tax burdens off of individuals. And we can do that, but we have to get the details right. And Chris, I'm the detail guy. Frank has a great vision. Ed has a great vision. Someone's got to put the details to it. And I've been working on the details for the last 4 years in the General Assembly.
Okay, so you've been in the General Assembly for 4 years, and a part of those 4 years we're going to switch over to healthcare now. We've had a very long discussion about Medicaid expansion relative to the Affordable Care Act. You have a different perspective than your Republican counterparts. You support Medicaid expansion, right?
No, actually, I don't support Medicaid expansion. I had the chance to vote against Medicaid expansion 6 times since 2014, and I ordered to prevent the governor from doing it unilaterally the off season, and I voted to make sure he can't do that either. What I did do is in 2014, in a special session, I put together legislation with Tom Russ that would reform Medicaid. You see, the problem, Chris, is, and my opponents just now seem to finally get this, Medicaid's been expanding every year going back to 1997. It used to be in 2006, it was 875,000 people in Medicaid. Now it's over 1.4 million. Medicaid in 2006 cost the Commonwealth about $4.5 billion a year. Now it costs over $8.7 billion a year. Medicaid's been expanding. My opponent is saying that we got to stop expanding or we can't expand it. They don't get it. They've been expanding it. I put a plan in place that actually would reduce the cost of the Commonwealth and people and the number of people in the system. Because the problem with Medicaid, Chris, is people can't get off the system. If you make $1 too much than the allowable limit, you lose all your benefits. So people can't take the dollar an hour wage increase. They can't take the promotion because what they lose in benefits is so much greater. I put a bill together with Tom Russ in 2014 that would have allowed people to go and start walking themselves off Medicaid, where if they made a little bit more than the allowable limit, they got to keep the majority of it. Some of it went to the state to offset their benefits, and it started walking them off the Medicaid system and started creating a system where it wasn't growing exponentially every year because right now, Chris, it used to be 5% of our budget. Now it's over 20% of our budget. It's going to bankrupt the Commonwealth unless we reform it. So I did not support expanding the existing Medicaid system. You can't throw good money after bad, but unlike my opponents, I'm not putting my head in the sand either because as business people, you and I understand the only thing that happens when you put your head in the sand is that fire gets a heck of a lot bigger and a heck of a lot closer to you when you finally yank it out.
So on Medicaid, it sounds like you want to reform. If those reforms are taken in, then would you be willing to draw down the federal money to expand Medicaid?
Well, first of all, I don't want to expand Medicaid. I mean, the whole concept of expanding Medicaid, I want to be clear. I want less people in the system, and I want it to cost the Commonwealth less on an annual basis. That is the goal. Now, if the federal funds are there to allow us to decrease the cost to the Commonwealth compared to our trend line today and the number of people in the system, yeah, if I can use those funds to get people off Medicaid, you bet. I mean, Obama wanted an expansion of Medicaid to put more people in the system. I want to use resources to get people out of the system and not have it be that captive environment that they're stuck with today.
Well, I mean, and the counter argument always is that Republicans just they'll show grandma being pushed off a cliff in a wheelchair. How do you say you want to kick people off or get people off Medicaid and provide care, insurance coverage for those who can't afford it, quite frankly?
Well, Chris, I'll give you a real world example. It's a Republican friend of mine. He had a good job. He unfortunately came down with cancer. He lost his job. He's getting his master's degree at Liberty University right now. Very soon, in about a few weeks, he's going to be going looking there for a job. Now, here's the dilemma he's going to face. He's got cancer. He's on Medicaid. He's going to get offered a job or get a chance to maybe be a consultant. If that job pays well, but does not have health insurance, he's not going to be able to take the job, Chris. We have a system that stops people from getting themselves off of government entitlements. There's a lot of people, him, my cousin, they don't want to be on government entitlement programs, Chris, but we have a program that says it's all or nothing. We're not going to let you walk yourself off. That's what we have to fix. And you don't push someone, you don't have to push them off a cliff. You don't have to shove them off of Medicaid. There's a lot of able-bodied, able-minded people that want to get off government entitlements, but we have a system that doesn't help them do it. And that's what we have to fix.
So you're taking a more graduated approach to entitlements, government funding of programs, rather than saying you're all or nothing. I mean, is that fair to say it that way?
It does. I think you hit it on the head. All or nothing doesn't work because people have to take all, not part. But there are a lot of able-bodied, able-minded individuals that don't want all. They only want some, because by taking some, they're able to create a better opportunity for themselves and their family as they walk themselves off the system. But we don't have that path in Virginia.
And I would draw an anecdote from our personal experience of running our company. We wanted to give a guy a raise because he had done a great job. And he said, okay, I'll take it. But if my landlord calls, don't tell him, because he'd lost his housing benefits. We're like, well, we can't do that. But he said, then I don't want the raise. We're like, what? I mean, why punish someone? So I understand your line of thinking there, but the problem is, again, driving down those healthcare costs. What can we do to drive down healthcare costs for everybody, not just those on Medicaid?
Sure. Well, a big piece of the equation is we have to go into a system that is more managed care as opposed to fee-for-service. You can't just have those that every time something happens, they show up in the ER. That's the most expensive doctor visit. We have to get people in a managed care scenario where, especially those with mental health issues. So it's not that we get them stable, and then we don't keep up with them again. And when they come off their meds, they're back in the ER or wherever in the hospitals. You have to have them into a managed care scenario where doctors are making sure they stay on their medicine. They're there for them in case something happens. That's the type of stuff that I think that we can do that drives down those costs a little bit.
Well, what can we do for everybody else who wants to have their health care costs reduced? I mean, it's not just, one of the problems in our public policy is that some people pay health insurance and other people don't. And let's just be honest, if you're driving down the overall cost of healthcare and trying to manage the cost down, then it becomes less expensive for everybody. Any ideas and thoughts on how we can do that?
Well, I mean, if you look at the driving factors of healthcare, some of that we have a hard time. The malpractice stuff. I mean, the trial lawyers associations fight us tooth and nail every time we turn around. But obviously, if you drive down the cost of insurance for doctors, it drives down the cost of healthcare. But we're not going to get anywhere on that with the trial lawyers. If you drive down the cost of uninsured healthcare, which right now the estimates are 20% of all of our healthcare premiums, yours and mine and others out there, is because of those uninsured. But if we help those actually get the support, the coverage they need in that managed care scenario, that will drive it down for you and I and the rest of us. I'm a big fan of competition across state lines. We've done some stuff at the state level last year to make sure we're set, but that's going to have to start at the federal level. They've got to open it up so we can get competition in health in insurance companies across the line. I think that will start driving down the cost as competition always does.
Okay, let's move over to another big item in the budget. That's how things are driven in the Commonwealth for us policy, education. What are your thoughts on K-12? What do we need to do to make our K-12 system even better?
Well, we have to make sure that we allow for innovation in the classroom, and a lot of that has to do with bandwidth. Chris, going around the Commonwealth, there are so many areas that don't have high-speed bandwidth, not just to the schools, but also into their homes. And you can't expect our children to truly have the foundation they need to compete globally if they don't have access to 21st century online education tools. So the first thing we need to do is build that bandwidth infrastructure on the Commonwealth. The second thing we have to do is we have to promote school choice. In the Commonwealth, we have less than 10 charter schools. I helped start a charter school in Virginia Beach, Green Run Collegiate. It's a great charter school. It's an international baccalaureate program that it runs. It's gotten national attention and been very successful. And some of what it's done to be so successful has bled over into the public school system that they're able to take advantage of as well. I think charter schools are truly a rising tide that lifts all ships. And it also allows for specialization, Chris. I was at the Julie Billiard School out in Cleveland about a year ago, where it's a non-public charter school for children on the autistic spectrum. And it's amazing the success that they've had. So I think that opening up school choice is something that will drive innovation and also drive success amongst public schools as well.
Okay, higher education. What are your thoughts on higher education? That's a big chunk of money. It's becoming politically very charged these days. Just yesterday, over in Indiana, the students at Notre Dame walked out on the vice president. That's a very dangerous situation when we over politicize education, especially in higher education. When there's so much money, affordability, accessibility are big issues. What are your thoughts on higher education? How do we resolve some of that conflict in higher education?
Two things I think that will do well. One is following a couple of states like Indiana, where they have performance metrics, and a good chunk of their funding for higher ed is related to performance metrics. Now, we can pick the metrics that are important to Virginia, whether it's graduation rates or time to graduate, or the majors that they certain percentage of them graduated in science field or mathematics fields, whatever metrics you want. And some of the funding for our higher ed universities then are tied to achieving those metrics, which at that point puts us puts the taxpayers, the General Assembly, and the universities all on the same motivation path. We're all kind of tied together, going in the same direction. The second thing, Chris, I think we need to do is look at freezing tuition. Governor Allen did it back in the day. Everyone was claiming the sky was going to fall. It didn't fall. Actually, our universities continued to thrive. Since then they become unfrozen, and I think we've gotten to some of the excesses that we may have had back then, and I think we need to look at doing that again, because you can't. Right now, not only is it unaffordable for many of our students, Chris, but at the same time, they're coming out with so much debt that they almost walk into a situation where they can't afford the debt service on those loans. And then the final piece of the equation is not everyone has to go to college for that 4-year degree, Chris. I think we all agree that education in our lives never stops, but we need to make. There's so much opportunity for vocational. Dominion Power. I was out there in North Anna nuclear facility, and they were explaining that they like to get new employees from high school. They'll go and take kids out of high school that are strong in math and science, put them in a 10-year program, and after 10 years, Chris, they're making 6 figures a year. If I knew that existed back when I was in school, I don't know if you and I'd be talking right now. So I think there's an opportunity for vocational. I mean, I'm down here in Hampton Roads, Chris. There's a shortage of welders down here. I mean, if you're an arc welder, you could write your own paycheck down here in Hampton Roads with these shipbuilding companies. So I think we need to be pushing the vocational trades in high school as well.
Well, it sounds like you're going towards more of a, what's the best utility for some of these higher education schools? And I guess when you look at the tuition and the cost and the overall burden of the cost of higher education, should we be looking at some of the programs in these schools, in higher education schools, that frankly aren't that necessary? I mean, how many programs do we need that study X that really have little to no economic impact? I mean, is that the when you get on the line of performance metrics? Do you need sociology? Yes, but how many programs do you need in the state? Do we start, if you want to be that, you can go over here and start duplicating efforts at all our higher education institutions. I mean, I say this because my alma mater, Washington and Lee, just came out with an aerial dance program. And I'm thinking, okay, if you want to study aerial dance, that's fine. But for a school of 2,200, what's the cost factor on your tuition? And do you really need that? And that's kind of like I mean, I love Cirque du Soleil, but really?
Chris, you're right. And that's what the metrics do. By putting the metrics in place that provide the funding, it makes universities look at what am I offering, because I need more students to come out of here in this area to get my funding as opposed to here. So it's a way for us to tailor those classes and where the students go without us actually going to universities and saying, stop offering this, start offering that. But that's exactly it. And Chris, you also hit it right on the head. The great thing in business, you have economies of scale, right? Is if you have 15 facilities, instead of having everyone duplicate each other, this one specializes in this one specializes in this, and so on and so forth. We need to have more of that at the university level. Why have some of our universities duplicate each other with certain specializations? Why not allow them to diversify a little bit? But I think that's what we'll get by tying some of the by tying some of the funding to the proper performance metrics.
Because I mean, remember back in the day, they had ag schools, and they were strictly agricultural schools, and we had teachers colleges, and they were strictly teachers colleges. And now we've sort of been trying to make all these different schools that are as everything to everybody. And on scale, that just doesn't make any sense in the business world. And maybe it's time to rethink that. Not that I'm trying to lead the conversation, but it just seems like there's a point of diminishing returns on some of these investments.
Well, you can't be all things to all people.
No. Let's run into some hardcore business issues. You brought up taxes in our tax profile in the Commonwealth. We talked about that with Ed and Frank's plans. Cost of doing business. Our rankings are bad. We're in most of the performance magazines and rankings that do these things that pay attention. We're in the upper 20s and low 30s when it comes to cost of doing business. And some of the ideas that are being floated by various candidates actually increase our cost of doing business. What have you seen on the campaign trail that you could think of and go, hey, probably not the best thing to do as far as policy changes?
Well, on the campaign trail. I mean, all the Republican candidates, I don't say necessarily something not the best thing to do. I mean, Jill Vogel put out a tax plan last year, and she meant well. She was trying to give back some of the budget surplus every year to taxpayers, and this was really her first stab at tax reform. She wants to be a leader on tax reform because she saw the polls, and that's what people want. But she ended up increasing the marriage penalty and ended up causing wealth redistribution. She actually created a scenario where people would end up getting more in tax refunds than what they owed and paid to begin with. So, I mean, those are types of things we have to stay away from. But like I said, it was accidental. She's, trying to get in and start doing tax reform. It's more of, what we need to do Chris, I started early on the campaign. I was out in Wise County, and I was at a barber's place, and he's 90 years old. He's been cutting hair for 70 years. And I walked through and I said, what's the difference in today and when you started? He said, Glenn, when I started cutting hair, I walked in, I got a pair of shears, I had a place, I started cutting hair. If people didn't like the way I cut hair, they just didn't come back. Now you got to get inspected, you have to get certified to be able to cut hair. And you're right. The craziness is the cost of doing business is so much higher because you need so many more certificates for things that honestly it's not a safety issue. And what government doesn't get, Chris, we not that long ago we were going through a pretty bad recession, and more entrepreneurs start up during the worst of times. Right, the unemployment rate's higher, people are losing their jobs. They're trying to start something out of the house, take care of themselves and their family. Yet that's also when the cost of entry is the highest. Government's looking for additional tax dollars. They're putting more fees on people. They have these certifications to start businesses. It should be now that we get rid of all these absurd regulations and certifications so people, if they want to go in and create opportunities for themselves and others, can do so without this huge, tax and regulatory burden. So we got to unwind a lot of this stuff. And starting with the barber cosmetic stuff, which I think you're going to see Ed maybe roll something out here shortly on, down to everything to construction. I used to do some construction in a prior business, and it's just crazy some of those regulations.
So regulatory reform, tax reform, Medicaid reform, education reform. What else do you want to reform in state government, Glenn? That sounds like a pretty hefty lift.
Well, we need to get it done. Look, I had a lot of opportunities growing up in Virginia. I got a great public school education. I was able to start a business, start a family, and now I serve. We need to protect that opportunity for that next generation, but it doesn't exist like it did for you and I. And it requires a heavy lift, and that's why I'm running. I'm not running to sit on my rear end and repeat 2,000 times if all the senators voted. I'm running out there to make change. It's why I went to MIT to look at research and development that was being done for coal, to bring that back to Southwest Virginia. It's why I went to Estonia overseas to look at manufacturing, robotic manufacturing over there to see if we can bring that back to Virginia. And I did this all on my own dime. It's an obligation that I feel that we need to do. And so there's a lot of great people running for different offices, but Chris, we need to have a heavy lift. And when we talk about those reforms, that's my 4-point plan across the board that I started with. I didn't start this race by mailing out a mail piece about bathrooms like one of my opponents. I didn't start it by mailing out a mail piece about guns. I'm one of the strongest Second Amendment people you're ever going to find. But I started this race on a 4-point plan to make Virginia #1 again for business and job growth. And that's what I expect to finish this race on, and we're still there today. And that's what I expect to deliver to the taxpayers of Virginia when it's all over.
Okay, what are those 4 points?
It's simple. It's tax reform. We need to create a system where entrepreneurs and small businesses can grow and flourish. We also need to get rid of antiquated tax policies that are double taxing in-state businesses and driving them to North Carolina, to D.C., to Maryland. It's modernizing education by the use of bringing in things like bandwidth and more innovation, but also increasing charter school opportunities. We need to make sure that we have that education system truly as a foundation. It's 21st century jobs. We need to make sure that we continue to bring in 21st century job opportunities, grow cybersecurity like we have up in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. We need to be a leader when it comes to new technologies, Chris, and we're just not there yet. We have the resources to be it, but we're really, really bad when it comes to PR and those types of things.
What do you make of the minimum wage increase talk on the Democratic side, raising it to $15 an hour? Where do you stand on minimum wage?
Oh my God, that's the craziest argument over there. I got into a debate with someone on camera 2 days ago about this. They didn't have a clue. Chris, I'm that small business owner. I understand this as much as anyone and better than anyone that's never owned a business. Here's what I tell people that don't get it. When people want to talk about the minimum wage and I tell them it'll put businesses out of existence, and they say, how's that? And I give them an example. I say, if you have 5 employees making $10 an hour and minimum wage is now $15 an hour, how much does it cost the business? And there's a group of people that say it costs $50 an hour difference. It's 10 times 5. And those people have never read the book, have never run a business. They're clueless. Then you get to people that say, no, it's $50 an hour. plus the benefits that go along with it. And at least those people read the book. Chris, then there's business people like you and I and others where we realize that that's not right either. Because the guy that was making 10 that gets 15, well, the guy that was making 13 wants 17. The guy that used to make 15 now wants 19. The guy that made 18 now wants 21. The guy that made 20 now wants 23, and that multiplier effect. That's why you're driving businesses out of existence. It's this raising the minimum wage isn't about lifting people in minimum wage today to another level. It's about that compression effect that you end up having to lift everyone in your business up, plus the cost of benefits associated with it. And that's what drives businesses out of existence. And that's what they don't get. And the minute I talk to them about that, their eyes glaze over. So I think they don't understand how businesses work. They don't understand the free market. They ask, well, Glenn, how do we raise labor wage? How do we get wages to a living wage? And I say, it's simple. Increase jobs and businesses in Virginia. And they don't get it. I'm like, if there's only so much labor, but you increase demand, the first thing that happens is the cost for that labor goes up because supply isn't keeping up with demand. We all learned that in Econ 101. So if you want to increase what tends to be the minimum wages, all you do is you increase the demand for that labor. And that's going to drive competition, and that's going to drive up the cost of that labor, and that's going to increase wages. It's worked in the past, it'll work today.
One of the candidates for governor supports directly the repeal of our right to work laws. How would that impact business in Virginia?
Chris, one of the few things that's holding Virginia together in our rankings, we just had to say that one of the few things that's holding us at number 13 and not making us worse are the right to work laws. That is something that is coveted by businesses. It's been mentioned by businesses coming to Virginia is one of the reasons why they come here is because of that law. That would crush us if we got rid of that. You know, it's kind of funny, Chris. Every year in the General Assembly, we argue, we try to protect the right to work. We tried to put it in the Constitution, as you know, a couple of years ago. And the Democrats' point was, you know, we're a right to work state. We all support this. We're never going to not have a right to work state. And we, as Republicans, kept saying, you're just saying that because you don't have control. But the minute you get control, you're going to try to take this away. And they're, you know, no, we won't. And sure enough, you got two governors out there saying that they want to get rid of Virginia as a right to work state. So it just goes to show that we were right in trying to put more protections in place in Virginia for it. And we can't afford for Democrats to go down that road.
Well, it was interesting that over the weekend I saw a tweet from the Kentucky governor, Matt Bevin, who was 2 years behind me at Washington and Lee, and he touted their change in right to work law that brought in a $1.2 billion manufacturing plant. And you know, it's as you know, a cornerstone of our economic development here in the Commonwealth is to have that right to work. It's often misportrayed in policy, but one of the other cornerstones is our AAA bond rating. And Standard & Poor's recently came out and said, Virginia, you're cutting it kind of close right now, and we're gonna put a negative watch on your bond rating. Not that we're going to downgrade it, but you're getting kind of close. What do you think we need to do to shore up our fiscal reality and get those general obligation bonds more secure?
Oh, Chris, that's a good point. I did a video on this on my YouTube channel because people don't, you know, it's kind of an in the weeds issue, but they don't understand how important it is. Your bond rating directly impacts the amount of what the cost is to borrow money. So as we do capital projects, the cost to the taxpayers can be higher because it's, you know, that interest rate is associated with their bond rating. There's a couple things that we have to do. First is we have to make sure we shore up that rainy day fund. You know, we've been drawing out that rainy day fund, and that's one of the things that that the rating agencies look at. The second thing is they look at our revenue to expenses, but they also look at our tax policies. Chris, when they rate us, they don't just rate us at a point in time. They rate us comparatively to other states and predictability of what's our potential for growth at the rate we've been going. And they see antiquated tax policies that are making us less competitive to other states. And that's one of the big reasons that we've kind of got that negative watch on us. We need to change those tax policies because if we don't, what they perceive will come to fruition. And that is that Virginia will be less competitive against other states, not only to bring new businesses there, but to grow our own businesses within it. and we'll get downgraded next time as opposed to just a negative watch. And when that happens, you become the spiral because as it is, you're already having a tough time in Virginia bringing businesses and growing businesses. But now the cost of bringing money in for infrastructure projects goes up, which makes matters worse, and that continues to drive you backwards. And then you get hit again on your bond rating. So we've got to put a stop to it right now and shore this back up.
And I think it's easy to say that McAuliffe's done a pretty good job in bringing down the unemployment rate, but what he's not responsible for is the sequestration that has had a dramatic impact on our high wage paying jobs. That's tough to do as governor in just 4 years, but every day it seems like we're announcing some sort of new economic development project in Virginia, bringing new jobs and whatnot. And there's a slow attrition of jobs that's occurring in the undercurrent, as it is in any economy, as you know. How do we get back to not just having a 3.8% unemployment rate, which is good? We want to have a low unemployment rate, and got to give our hats off to Governor McAuliffe to focusing on that. But we have to get those wages up. Sort of the balance in there, not going to the minimum wage as you've argued against and quite forcefully, but attracting those high tech, innovative jobs to the Commonwealth. What's your formula for that kind of success?
Well, the first thing, it comes back to tax reform. And I hate to always say it's tax reform, but here's the deal. We have a tax policy in Virginia, and you can see my animated whiteboard on this on my website. It's called cost of performance. They used to be that, all states that are on the Commonwealth or on the nation would charge income tax on based on where the service was being done. So, where the workforce is meant where the income tax is being charged to the business. But since 1980 or so, states have shifted. And I'll give you an example. If a cybersecurity company in Virginia provides protection for computers in Maryland, Virginia says your workforce that provides the protection is in Virginia. We want income taxes on it. Maryland says the customer that you provided for is in Maryland. We want income taxes. And that Virginia company pays double tax on those services. Conversely, if a Maryland business provided cybersecurity services to a Virginia company, Maryland says the customers in Virginia, we don't want taxes. Virginia says the work was being done out of Maryland, we don't want taxes. And now there's no income tax being paid on that revenue by that company in Maryland. So we have high-tech businesses moving away from Virginia to Maryland, to DC, to North Carolina that have all changed that tax policy. Every state in the nation's changed it but 17, including Virginia. So Chris, when I talk about we need those high-tech jobs here, that 21st century jobs, we're having a hard time getting them, and we're losing them today. And you can check with the economic development in Arlington, because I'll tell you this as well, because of tax policies like that. So the first thing we have to do is be competitive on a tax policy standpoint. The second thing we have to do is work on our PR, our marketing. Virginia is lousy at marketing. Chris, I chaired the cybersecurity subcommittee a couple of years ago, and if I heard one more time that Maryland is the place to be for cybersecurity efforts, I was going to jump out of the window. Maryland doesn't have a silver bullet, but they're really good about packaging things together and talking about themselves. We're not. We got the best resources here with our retired military coming out, some of them with very, very special skills. And we're right next to DC. We have the ability to lead on cyber, but we're lousy when it comes to promoting that. So, and same thing with other industries, manufacturing. So we need to make sure we promote ourselves better, but we also need to make sure that we have a tax climate that we don't get written off just because we think we operate in a vacuum in Virginia and not realize that other states are so much more competitive than we are. What we can't do, Chris, is do with what some of my opponents want to keep talking about. All they do is focus at the 30,000-foot view. North Carolina's corporate tax rate is X%, and they're going to lower it, and we got to lower ours to keep up. And what I keep telling people is that's not fine. If we want to lower ours, great and wonderful, but that's not going to solve a thing, because the problem Virginia has is at the detail level inside the policy. If our Virginia businesses are being double taxed, lowering our tax rate when they have to pay 2x doesn't make a difference. You have to get rid of the policies that are causing the problem. That's why we need someone with experience when it comes to business and tax reform, because having people jump in it for the first time, they think it's simple. They think it's as easy as signing a tax pledge, or they think it's as easy as just change the corporate tax rate. They don't have a clue that the problem is at the detail level inside the policies themselves, and that's what's hurting Virginia.
Are we? I mean, and I'm going to this be our last question as we transition out. You've been great with your time, and I know you have a very important day ahead of you. It sounds like we're heading towards more of a technocracy, because governing is very complex and it's hard to put a lot of what goes on in government into context so that people can digest and understand it and go, oh, okay, I get that. Is that fair to say that?
That government's becoming more complex?
Or it's more of a technocracy. It's so complicated. It's so mechanical, and it's not as emotional as some people would like it to be. It's just hard. Governing is hard.
It is, Chris. I don't know if it's ever been easy. I mean, I'm a numbers and sense type of guy. I'm a numbers person. I'm not an emotional person. I don't make decisions based on emotion. I make them based on facts. And I think governments have always been better off that made decisions based on facts and numbers and not necessarily on emotion. But I think we have hit an age because of so much available technology, so much availability when it comes to metrics and real numbers, that to keep up with other states, to be competitive, it's now more important than ever to make them based on facts and numbers and assessments and metrics than ever before. Because before, states, including Virginia, we never really had all that hard data so readily available at the level we have it today. So sometimes it was kind of a gut check or an emotional check. Now we've got all the facts, it's black and white. There really doesn't need to be tied any emotion to it. What's important is having people that understand those facts, those figures, and how to make changes that impact the real factors that move the needle. But I think you're 100% right. It's very technical. Things are interrelated, and we need people that can understand that when they start looking at making those changes to make Virginia better for that next generation.
Okay, Glenn Davis, delegate from Virginia Beach, candidate for the Republican nomination for lieutenant governor. Thanks for your time. We enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care, Glenn.